Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast to Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, along with my co host, Ed Carbajal. And on a weekly basis, we plan to bring you the biggest news and interviews in the world of combat sports. Ed, how you doing, my man?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy. I finally got the notorious Jon Jones to be on our show. I'd been talking to him about it for a while. What's up, John?
Hey guys, how's it going?
All
And
right.
immediately people realize, oh crap, not that one.
Yeah. So, like, how do people recognize you when they figure out you're not that Jon Jones? I actually used to refer to you as not that Jon Jones, and then Twitter Jon Jones. My buddy Jeff that you met the last time we hung out together at 223. He was like, "Oh, that's Twitter Jon Jones," and I was like, "Yeah." And then I had messaged you about Renato Laranja's podcast where they called you the cat guy. So, what's the most popular moniker you carry?
Um, Wrong John Jones or just Psy O. It's always some form of just like, wait, did he just talk about his cats? And oh, it's the other guy, the one that's nothing. Yeah.
So, but the funny thing is, I mean, we talked about it when we finally met face to face, because everything else that's happened, we became friendly through Twitter, and then we finally met in person. What was that for UFC 217, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, we had been communicating for a while. It's interesting how many people I've gotten to meet like through this whole thing over the years, which frankly has been like the whole value out of it for me, because I didn't really catch on to actually liking UFC and being into it till a bit later. But it was just the personalities and the people that drew me in. It's a hell of a way to learn about anything. Like having people you don't know yelling at you about something that you don't understand or know about.
Yeah.
But honestly, refusing to learn about it for the longest time really prolonged how fun it was.
What was it? How did it start? I mean, what was it like to wake up one morning and did it slowly hit, or was it one morning all of a sudden you had 100,000 notifications and you know?
It was a little bit of a trickle at first as he was starting to get famous, because I'd had at Jon Jones since 2007. Because I'm a tech early adopter. I'm on everything as early as I can with my name, because I mean, it's a generic name. It's kind of a challenge. So occasionally I'd get something like, "Hey, I saw you like beat that guy's ass. You're great." I'm like, "Cool, excellent. That's wonderful to hear. Who are we talking about?" And I also have email addresses like with my name, so I'm used to getting a lot of like spam for every Jon Jones on earth, and I thought it was just one other random jerk that can't write type his email address in correctly. But then UFC 151 happened, and that's when it went from from a little bit of a trickle to literally phone buzzing off the table like death threats aplenty. That's when if I recall correctly, Dan Henderson and Bones are going to be the headliners. Henderson got injured, backed out. No one but Chael Sonnen would fight Bones, and in that time was like, I think over 3 days, I got 6,000 pieces of hate mail, death threats, all that. Like that was when I realized this is a little bit different than people just signing up for car insurance quotes. These are sincere death threats.
Yeah, that's one of the things that piqued my interest when we first met. You had told me like the first threat you got like really disturbed you, and then you decided to react the way that you react now, which I thought was cool, because it's one of those things like you hear about bullying and stuff online now these days, and a lot of people will take it to heart and get hurt, but you kind of like just took a moment and paused and gathered yourself and responded with comedy, which some folks after a while going back and forth, they'll realize, oh, wait a minute, you're not that guy. And you actually put that one up. I don't know if you still have it pinned to your profile. The guy that was like, "Oh, you just some white dude."
I do.
That's my favorite one.
Yeah, mine too, man. He just kept going. He just would not get it. It's only ever been my face. I've always made that my rule, because I don't want to get suspended for seeming like I'm imitating him. I'm actually very careful about that. But my God, when I was talking about like beet and kale and ginger juice and stuff. It's like, wait a second. Except I found out later that I guess Bones had joked about his like beet juice aftermath. Like, I didn't mean to resemble. That wasn't a reference. I didn't mean to resemble that. I sure get very ignorant.
How often does like your phone blow up? Like, say, because obviously, uh, uh, being mistaken for the fighter Jon Jones is not your day job. But you're pretty public. We know you're in the gaming industry, and you're a published author. So, like, what happens every time Jon Jones is in the news? I'm sure your phone blows up. How do you handle it when you're like on your day-to-day travels?
Well, honestly, I just find the nearest bar, or I grab my laptop and just find the nearest Wi-Fi hotspot and just sit down and then just like pace myself, but basically just drink beer till it's done. I've been a freelancer for a few years, so I'm able to take time off of work pretty easily. So the very first time it happened with 151, and now basically everyone in my life understands it's a weird thing that happens because I don't really tell most people I know face to face. They find out like accidentally, like through following me on Twitter, or it shows up on a news site they follow. Like it's actually, I do this deliberately to see who learns about it, because I pop up places people never expect. But so I'd say like maybe Bones is down to about 2 atrocities a year. And it's usually like one in the spring and then one like September or October ish, and that's when I really have to batten on the hatches. But otherwise, he seems to have very little social media presence outside of wanting to fight like shaped Bigfoots like Brock or old men like Chuck. That's really the only action on Twitter I've gotten lately regarding him.
Yeah,
it's just like these weird half-assed like remember me kind of tweets.
Well, you're the reason why. I mean, up until you got on Twitter, obviously, probably a handful of years before I did, and most people would tweet, they would assume Jon Jones was Jon Jones, whether it makes sense or not. Not that you're not Jon Jones, but when an MMA fan's doing it, so I always make sure to really check the profile. I'll even click on it before I double check everything just to make sure that somebody doesn't have the same name. One of the funniest things that I think I ever saw was. I don't remember what event it was at or what it was, but right before one of Cormier's fights, I think it might have been, or it was Daniel Cormier's birthday, and didn't they bring you in to sing happy birthday to him and say that Jon Jones was coming into?
They had the UFC approached me to record a little video saying, "Hey, here's Jon Jones to wish you luck." and Zombie Prophet is like his gifs are just incredible. Like immediately, It's just like that look where Daniel's just like, what? I mean, like I shivered like full body when I saw that. Like, oh my god! Like it's one of the baddest men on the planet, and I'm involved in provoking him.
That's funny. I actually didn't know about that.
I'll shoot you a link. It was actually really funny to have been thought of. Apparently, he laughed about it. He was a really good sport about it, but just the look in his eyes, like, ugh.
Yeah, he went from laughing about it. It was, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if luck for his fight. For some reason I thought it was his birthday, but yeah, luck for his fight. He was, all excited about it, and then he heard Jon Jones, and he got the look of death in his eyes, like, you better not bring that guy in here, And then when he came on the video, I just remember him cracking up, and that was a hilarious moment.
I heard there's a short bit that they edited out. And there's also something that I sent him, making a joke like, like this this is such a cheeky joke of me to make. Sorry, I'm making such a pill. The UFC cut that part out. I can't imagine why.
Yeah, I mean, who knows with some of the stuff they do these days, but so speaking of the UFC, like obviously you were at 217 and then you were at you went to 223, right?
Yeah, in Barclays, yeah. It was, Rosa Majunas versus unpronounceable.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, why did I try?
You know what? I heard an audio playback. I think it was Bill Burr played it on his podcast of the proper way to say her name, and I still can't say it. But yeah, that event, you always put up really good reviews, and I really found it interesting how when you did 217, it was your first MMA event, and how that just being there made you a fan of the sport, and so that's why I'm really happy to get you and Matt together talking, because he and I have been following the sport for a long time, and Matt is really encyclopedic with his memory of like if you can't remember a detail about a fight, he could probably pull it right out of the top of his head most
That's
times.
awesome.
But so and you had said you had made this really long thread on Twitter that you kind of reviewed the first event. So like this is the first sport you've ever been into, like because you said you weren't like a sports guy at all, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I never really got the appeal. And I mean, I did go to UFC 135 because I happened to be visiting I started my company. My first client was in Denver. I was staying with my friend there because I couldn't afford a hotel, and UFC 135 was that week, and he had extra tickets. So I thought, hey, I'll see that Jon Jones guy. But prior to that, I mean, because I'm thinking like, shit, what the hell, why not? But prior to that, and even after, it was just sort of like a interesting thing these people are doing, sort of thing. But 217 was the first, like, okay, I get it. Like everybody was like 4 titles change hands. 217.
Yeah,
Holy crap! It was my first time in a Madison Square Garden too.
yeah, that was an amazing event, man. I mean, I don't know if you read. I wrote something for Sure Dog on that. I mean, I was getting a little tinfoil hat with it, but I wrote about how 217 and 2017, and especially that fight with Rose, how she won in the third round at 303. Like there was all these like numbers that kind of like related to each other. Even
numerology, nice.
Yeah, she mentioned it in her post-fight interview. So, I mean, if that's your first MMA event, man, you're really lucky like that because I mean, my first MMA event was I think it was like a Ring of Combat in Atlantic City or something like that. So, Matt, what was yours?
My first MMA, well, I saw Shane Mosley box at the Indian Reservation out here, but the first MMA event was a bare knuckle, no rules, Cobra Combat. My buddy Mark Hall put on, the old UFC champion. First UFC was UFC 33, the first legal one in Las Vegas, and
Nice.
right after 9/11
Oh
in
wow!
2001. So,
Oh wow!
but you said you went to 135 too, so you're the first fight you ever went to was actually a Jon Jones fight.
Yeah.
That's pretty because I think you fought Rampage that night.
Yeah. I remember the end of, I think it was the end of the second or third round. He had like this weird little like leapfrog thing over, and I'm like, ooh, he's bad, because that was before the Jesus-y crap seemed like a put on.
Yeah.
To be blunt.
Well, with the leapfrog, that was when he took somebody's back, like jumping over. That's what you're talking about.
Oh, it's like when he was exiting the ring, like he did a leapfrog over Rampage and knocked him down. I mean, just sort of like the hell with you. It was just like I didn't know that much about the sport, but it seemed, aside from fists and feet, it seemed.
Yeah. So the one of the things that you did too that I noticed that you had put on social media, you started researching fights after 217. Like, did you get a Fight Pass account and everything, or what happened there?
Yeah, so I signed up for the Fight Pass trial, and I ended up subscribing, and I was really getting into it because I'd never seen Connor fight, and I decided, well, holy crap, the streaming service is actually really good, because I work in video games and media and entertainment, and this kind of like streaming services and stuff are kind of like my thing. I understand them on a technical level, and I was surprised, like, holy crap, I could see his entire fight career chronologically, just sitting here, and get the full commentary from it, and also get fight recommendations from people. So I've been like crowdsourcing my fight education from Twitter, and it's been just like adding to my Fight Pass queue, and it's been outstanding. Like seeing, because I'd only seen like individual fights before. I'd never really seen someone's progression or the growth as a fighter, and and also seeing how they work, how good they are in the octagon, and how amazing he is on the mic immediately afterward, despite having just been hit in the head many times. Like it's the first time I'm like, I want to follow this guy and see this. Just new feelings coming from like a lifelong nerd,
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, his fights are fun to go to. It's definitely an experience between just him being a good fighter, and then the Irish crowd it's a wild environment to be a part of. I went to his fight at Madison Square Garden and been in one in Vegas, and when I left Madison Square Garden, I thought I was in the middle of Dublin. I mean, it was
Yeah.
chanting, and I mean, they went walking down Times Square,
Seventh
or
Avenue. Yeah, they shut
yeah,
down Seventh Avenue.
oh, they walked right through a commercial that was filming. Security was tossing Irish people left and right, trying to get them out of the filming. That was about 3 a.m. It was a fun, wild night. But you talk about Fight Pass, and I'd say that's one of the main differences between fans that are getting involved today and people like me and even Ed to a certain extent. I couldn't. I was ordering bootleg tapes from Russia, from Japan.
Wow.
I have more tapes that aren't in English that I mean, it's like watching an old VHS with, kind of like you're trying to watch old Spice Channel on the satellite dish, where you might see somebody throw an elbow, but you weren't quite sure if it was a knee or not. But
A bald guy or a boob?
oh man, people would come over. I'd go, hey, I got the fights. I'd get some box of tapes, and they'd come over and go, yeah, we're not sitting here for 8 hours watching that. It's not even in English. But yeah, the Fight Pass day is amazing. I got to figure somebody out who wants to buy a bunch of DVDs, because now I can click on one click and watch them all. And I got 2,000 of them sitting in my closet somewhere. So that's great though. But so Connor, anybody else other than Connor that caught your eye? That you checked out?
I went through, I think, almost everything Daniel Cormier has done, just because I wanted to get more of a sense of him, because I feel like I'm obligated to watch every Jon Jones fight. I'd only seen him versus DC, and I hadn't really seen DC get to unload and be him. He was the most different fighter that I was used to watching, watching him win over and over. And between that and I watched a short Viceland documentary where they had one of the more recent Gracies going into the history of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and going into some of the basic techniques and understanding, being able to understand wrestling a little better. That was incredibly interesting and educational to wrap my head around, because coming into it with no knowledge, it looks like they're sitting still, but hearing the little explanation, actually that's literally his entire body weight being pressed onto him in a space this big, and it hurts like hell. And so that was sort of a mind-blowing thing, seeing him work through all these tough looking dudes. That was a lot of fun. I'm still trying to find the next fighter I want to start following, because I got carried away at season 1 of The Ultimate Fighter, and that's been a blast. Just like a little Forrest, little kitty. They're so young. I follow him on Twitter now.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So that's what you're watching the Ultimate Fighter season from beginning to catch up to, because they're on, what are they, 27, 28 now, Matt?
27.
Yeah.
I've been told which ones to watch. Number 1, I think 1 and 18 are the top 2 suggestions. Was 18 the first one with women, or is that 18, 17, somewhere in there?
I got the poster in here somewhere. Yes, it's either 18 or 19.
So those are my top recommendations, and honestly, that's been a fun way to engage with the sport, because I've got to know and all these people over the years, and I get to see what they're into and get to kind of geek out along with them, and that's been a really fun way to learn. It's I'm ignorant. What should I do?
Yeah, but what's cool too is you're coming in I remember when we first talked, and I told you how the sport was banned in New York, and you see, you didn't know anything about it, and I told you about Sheldon Silver and the corruption with the culinary union and stuff like that, and so it's you're getting into it right at the time that it can actually come to you,
Exactly. That's been such a joy. And frankly, you teaching me that has helped me explain that to my family in a way that makes kind of sense. It makes me seem more like an insider than a hapless bystander. They don't know.
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, my family doesn't know. I mean, they know now because I told them, but if outside of Combate Americas, they really don't watch it, because I'm Mexican, so that they only watch the Spanish channel. But what I was going to ask you was, so obviously the confusion with Johnny Bones Jones got you into UFC and into MMA, and then you started watching other promotions. So we know you've gotten the VIP treatment from the UFC, but we had Matt Marsden on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he's the guy that wrapped your hands when you got invited to Bellator. So
Top Man Matt, I've known him for years on Twitter. Yeah, another one of the guys.
Yeah, so how sitting in your first Bellator event, what did you think of Bellator?
It was incredible. It was the closest I'd been and it was the most visceral it was because I'd never because at 135 I had CTF way back, so I was still just like watching ants kind of. So for the most part, I was watching what's happening on the monitors, but I was actually being close enough that I can almost like hear and feel everything that's happening. It's close enough that actually watching them makes more sense than watching a certain camera angle. It give it a whole completely new dimension. Like all the Paramount guys were incredibly cool, really funny. They put me on a train, put me up at the Mohegan Sun overnight, and gave me front row seats to 194. I got to meet King Mo as soon as I got to the casino. He and I have a lot of background in Oklahoma. He was telling me he went to see, I think, he went to see the world's largest ball of rubber bands, and I think it was like Ada, Oklahoma, or something. We just talking about that whole thing for a bit. Super nice guy, and I was able to take along a buddy of mine who was more of a fan than I've been. He's able to kind of give me context. So whenever I go to an event, I always have like a fight buddy that I've been friends with that kind of knows the whole thing to bring along. So like, when things are happening, it's like, okay, they've actually faced 2 or 3 times before. Here are their strengths. Like look especially for submission from this guy. So it's like I got my kind of private like buddy whispering in my ear kind of thing at the same time. It just adds so many more dimensions to it than I thought possible. Because I mean, again, I just come from such a geeky background, but it's nice to have the opportunity and to be open enough up to it to appreciate it. Because I'd be pretty freaking insufferable if I wasn't grateful or interested.
Yeah.
Being a gamer, did you grow up playing Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or any? I mean, did you play any of those fight games that
as much as possible? Oh my god, yes. like Mortal Kombat was like the seminal game of my youth. Even though I didn't have a console and I wasn't allowed to play it, but anytime I could go over to like a friend's house or anything I could do like to read about it, or anytime we're at like an arcade or a pizza place, they still had like a Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat arcade machines. Oh man, I was glued to those. Like just like memorizing the moves and I had to figure out how they all come together. I'm terrible at them, god awful. I mean, I'm the worst player in the world, but damn, I appreciate them. Marvel versus Capcom, that whole series.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Oh no, I was gonna say the Mortal Kombat. For some reason, I just had a flashback. I feel like Nintendo, which I had it on, had like the censored version where they had like less blood and you couldn't do the fatalities or so I tried to get over to my cousins and get on his Sega Genesis and play the real version as much as possible. But games like that, I mean, that's what kind of sparked my mind when I started seeing these fights. I was a big pro wrestling fan and stuff growing up, so I always kind of had the what would happen if Hulk Hogan fought Muhammad Ali in a real fight, and the Street Fighter, same kind of thing, especially, you talk about watching old UFCs. I'd personally recommend just starting from the beginning. I know that's a long hell of a grind, but seeing some of the stuff where Hoist Gracie comes along and just seeing the evolution. I mean, seeing John McCarthy when he's about 20 years old is quite a shock too, but
oh my god, I can't imagine. He seems
like
some of those like born that age.
No, you won't believe it, but just seeing it from the no rules. I mean, you've got fights where people are punching each other in the nuts, and it's perfectly legal. I mean, it's literally Mortal Kombat. The first fight ends with a tooth flying in the crowd, and the referee not knowing if he's allowed to stop it or if he has to watch the guy basically die in front of him in the ring. I mean, it is. That's if you could get that's what I'd recommend. Just taking your time, starting early. You can always check a quick review to see some of the events that are a little slower, but I'd say the first 6 UFCs are pretty much probably 7 I would say are mandatory viewing. They fought 3-4 times a night and bare knuckle, no rules, and it created a lot of the characters that kind of made a name up until about 5 or 6 years ago when they all started disappearing from the sport.
Like my god, I forgot that they would fight more than once a night. That is just outrageously hardcore.
Yeah, there's in Japan they still do it at the end of the year. The Risen Fighting Federation. I always call it the New Pride. I don't know if that's accurate, but because a lot of it's the same president, right? Matt Sakigabara.
Yeah, it's the Pride production people and the president who the UFC had bought out, and those guys have fought through and tried to put on some other events. But yeah, the UFC, UFC 2, for example, is a 16-man tournament one night. Hoist Gracie's I think he's the second smallest person in the tournament, and he ends up winning it after fighting 4 guys that are basically all heavyweights, and he weighs about 175.
Good God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just as far as like the respect, it's basically a big infomercial for Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, because that's kind of how it was put together. They picked their most like humble looking fighter and set him in there with a bunch of, it's a lot of beer brawlers and stuff like that. But even to this day, I'll grab a 6-pack and put on UFC 2 and watch some stuff that you'll just never be able to see anymore. It's
Oh my God, I may do that tonight. That sounds absolutely kick-ass. I appreciate the recommendation.
Oh, and the best thing is, I think up until about, the longest fight up till like UFC 4 was about 5 minutes long. So it's you can get through them quickly, and it's that would be my recommendation though. I'd start there and just see where it goes, and you watch the evolution of the rules. You'll start to see why they added certain stuff, why you can't fish hook, which is ripping a guy's mouth or nose, and you come across where, I don't know if you've heard of Tank Abbott or not, but he's one of the early, I think he was banned from over 200 bars here in the Southern California area before he, before he showed up in UFC. But you see the evolution of why you can't knee people in the head, why you can't soccer kick them in the head. It just kind of, you see the results of some of that stuff, and why the American audience didn't put up with it like the Russians and even the Japanese to an extent kept up with.
Wow. That sounds absolutely fascinating. Just being able to like see those fundamentals of that come together. Because I've been to bar, like I have friends that are MMA fans. I've been to like bars, and if there's like a pay-per-view at somebody's house, I'll bring a 6-pack and kind of like half watch. So I have some exposure to like some of that and some of the names, but not that far back. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think another recommendation that I don't know if anyone told you, but the Pride events is something you should check out too, just for the spectacle alone. The presentation, it's something relatable to the way that like so how like fighting games always have some type of story involved.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it's almost like that. But speaking of fighting games, didn't you I know I've always tried to campaign for them to add you as a secret character in the EA UFC game, but didn't you tell me you took a tour of like when they were working on the last game or something like that? You were somehow brought close to it.
I was actually traveling to Vancouver for business, and a lot of my work overlaps in the video game industry, and so I was at Electronic Arts for completely unrelated reasons. And Joff Harrower, the lead programmer of UFC 3, recognized me in the EA lunchroom and stopped and asked to take a photo with me. And then he offered to give me a tour of the motion capture facility and see where all the game is made and meet the lead producer. So I was there for like 3 or 4 days. So the next day he took me there. Corey Anderson was doing his motion capture recording that day. So I got to meet the developers, got to meet Corey, who was super cool, really nice. We still follow each other on Instagram and Twitter. And it was just, I just got to, I think it was before they'd officially announced it or shown anything. So it's kind of cool to see like a little peek behind the scenes, get to meet some of the devs. Because, I feel silly for not having realized this, but they're like the perfect intersection for people that work in video games like I do, and MMA fans are likely to know who I actually am. And they could not have been any nicer or friendlier. The facility was super cool. I was geeking out about it because I know like technically how all that kind of crap works on some level. And this was just like, this is what you do with that much money? Oh my God. It's a hell of a facility and a really, really nice team. Jeff Harwood, actually, he posts like all their patch notes and improvements and changes and stuff for UFC 3 on Twitter. And he does an awesome job at like, being a huge geek and fan and listening to the community and kind of messaging how the game's evolving based on user input. He's one of the rare ones. It's actually a really cool developer to watch and really good to the fans. I like him very much. I'm grateful for the kick-ass tour I got.
So how come they didn't try to get you with the little nodes on and motion capture you and try to plug you in that game somehow as a secret character? That's my question.
See, the funny thing is, my job was for many years has been pricing that out and knowing exactly how much that costs. And I think so I actually years ago got to go behind the scenes to a studio in Shanghai that was developing all the characters for the first UFC game. So I actually got to meet the team and get all the inside production knowledge for how long it takes to make a single character. And like in 2010, it was like 3 or 4 months of development, not even for the animation, just for building a character and like designing like which parts of their face bruise first or bleed or crack. They have like a bruise map that like fades in a sweat map that fades in more and more depending on exactly where you're getting punched or where you're getting hit. And it's even more complex now. So it would have been probably easily like 25,000 to a couple $100,000 to like put me and all of my glory in. It's not just a fat joke against myself. But you could probably shoehorn me in there pretty cheaply for less than that. But I'm not gonna. I'd be honored, but I'm never gonna ask.
I've one of the things that when I got involved in this sport is I could probably count on one hand the amount of jerks that I've ran into. Have you been surprised by the? I mean, you've had obviously you've dealt with a lot of fans that I'm not necessarily always the biggest fan of, but as far as the fighters and the people that are running the shows and just everybody associated actually with what goes on with the fight world, how's that been? I mean, it sounds like you've had a pretty cool experience without naming names necessarily. Have you ran into anybody that hasn't treated you well, or as fighters or anybody generally?
Honestly, no, not really. Like I've been in. So I have a lot of fighters that follow me now that I've actually like spoken to, like both male and female fighters in and out of the UFC. And the people that are involved behind the scenes have always been, honestly, everybody is just, my whole career is working with geeks, and all my friends are geeks for video games and making them. This is just another industry full of geeks about fighting. It's the same kind of love, the same kind of interest, the same memes, the common language, sense of humor. It's fine. It's really neat finding people in that same kind of like, so much of this defines my life kind of level about as I am about video games and techie stuff as they are about MMA and fighting. And I guess I've gotten really lucky that people have given me the time of day, because I mean I'm not even as interesting as like a squirrel that rides like a jet ski. I'm like I fill empty news cycles. Like I know I'm just like a silly little background character, but I mean I still get free tickets occasionally, or I get to like meet a fighter randomly. I met Forrest Griffin at a bar randomly. He was one of the first people I'd heard of, and he'd actually, I think he was like dimly aware of me. Just I feel like everybody's been incredibly nice in humoring me and helping me nurture my interest, my genuine interest and respect for the sport, because I never want to make fun of something people like. I don't like, that doesn't make me feel better. It doesn't do anybody any good. I mean, a lot of people love this, and I'm starting to see a lot of the reasons why. And it's been cool seeing what the sport's like through different people's lenses, like what they're like, what they love, what they don't love, and actually knowing who people are talking about when they're freaking out about a thing, being able to relate to that and have that make sense for the first time is just crazy. Like Colby Covington, I'm like, I knew who that is. He's terrible, right?
The thing about you said about the geek culture, though, I mean, there's a lot of geeks in the MMA, even like the competitors. If you look at Mighty Mouse, he has a very popular Twitch channel. Demetrius Johnson, I'm talking about, and Angela Hill. She's very public about her love for video games and cosplay and all that stuff.
Oh, she's great. Jessamine Duke also.
Jessamine Duke and Roxanne Modafferi. I mean, the list goes on. So they just did something. I don't know if you watch it. They did something where they're playing the UFC. I think Dana White was in on it too. They were playing the video game, and they put it on YouTube. Did you watch that, Matt? I didn't even get to catch it.
No,
like 5 days ago. Yeah, they did it like sometime last week, but it was to plug the game, or I guess an update or something like that. But
it's a great idea.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying all that just because what you just mentioned. I mean, I think there's more fight fans that are hardcore gamers than you think. I mean, there's even a lot of the guys that follow you. I think there's a guy named Patrick Chapman that he's part of one of the MMA Team MMA for Life guys on Twitter. He's a hardcore gamer, and I think he follows you as well.
Oh, nice.
And he's a big Street Fighter fan, talking about fighting games. But yeah, it's you're not alone in because you keep saying that you grew up as a geek. I mean, I'm a geek too. I mean, I love comic books. I mean, this YouTube channel is part of a website that follows like a lot of like horror films and conventions and stuff too. So on top of MMA. So it's definitely everybody's a geek. I think it's more acceptable and it's not taboo like when we were kids, you know.
Right. And I guess to like some degree, maybe I've been, having been as open minded as I could. That like people that have other interests. I guess maybe I went too close to like the story of stereotypical, like, the sun is bad, bacon is good, video games, kind of. But no, it's been, I made more interesting new friends from different walks of life than I'd ever had before, because most of my friends came from work in the industry. Honestly, this whole MMA thing has been great for expanding my friends group and view of the world. Like, I don't just do one thing now.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Are you drinking Founders, by the way? I see you drinking something.
Oh, this is Stone Ruination 2.0.
Oh, okay.
And I've just finished Lagunitas Pills.
Oh, nice.
Both good. The Stone Brewery, the very first one, was built probably a mile and a half from my house I grew up with in San Marcos here in Southern California. Yeah, so they have nice breweries around here. I mean, beer gardens and really, mid to high priced food, and really classy joint really for a brewery. Even though they're popping up everywhere, that's one of the top shelf ones around here.
Oh, I absolutely love Stone. I haven't been to the original one. My brother-in-law lives in San Diego, and I've gone to a few other smaller tasting rooms, but I want to go to like where it all began.
You ever drink Karl Strauss?
Yes. Oh man, I had an amazing. I had my I think 5-year anniversary with my wife at Karl Strauss just a few months ago.
When I was, I think, about 18, we're going to talk about beer for a minute because I know it's a topic we all get along with. I was at Karl Strauss, and before he passed away, actually, Karl Strauss came walking through the brewery, and I wasn't 18. I was 21. I think I had my real ID then, but yeah, he came through and shook all our hands, and it was just one of those things. He had his picture on all the bottles, and before all the microbrew world took over, seeing Karl Strauss come walking through and saying what's up with his big German accent was awesome.
That's so cool. Oh man, just perfect time, perfect place. Yeah, man, like that place. That was like one of the highlights of my trip. Actually, you got to meet the dude.
That's one of the things I think John found out quickly at back when we first met at 217 is how many MMA fans, media, and just people involved were super into beer. I already forgot the name of that bar that we first met at. That's Forrest Griffiths was there too. What was that bar?
It was a good enough bar. We can't remember the name. That was the one where they had the punching machine, right?
Yeah. Wow, I can't believe I forgot the name of that place.
It's like full circle because isn't the first bar you took me to at a video game bar?
Oh yeah. That's the barcade in the village that we went to, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I can't bar.
Same. I just remember like seeing everybody, like there's like 15 or 20 guys pretend not to realize who he was, but totally watching, waiting to punch the machine and see the reading.
Yeah, and then I remember the 223 place was Uncle Barry's, but that place I feel like it was something cowboy sounding on. I know it was on West 29th. That's all I remember. But yeah, I mean obviously beer is a big part. Flying Brian, you follow Flying Brian on Twitter, John?
Yeah. I was actually introduced to him saying like, you're both beer guys. You should talk.
Yeah. So he actually does like a fight and like a beer pairing for events. That's one of the things he does now. So it's pretty cool that
follow that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Rather
like
than
add notifications.
Yeah, instead of just ingesting everything that when we're all together at the same place. It's hard to find good. There's better beer by you than by me because for folks listening, I mean, John's in New York, I'm in New Jersey, but I actually go. I messaged you. I was in your neck of the woods this past weekend. They had a good selection of sours up in Greenpoint, so I went to a Torst.
Torst is amazing.
Yeah,
Torsten is it Greenpoint or Dirk the Norseman now?
Well, Greenpoint is Greenpoint. You're talking about Greenpoint Ale House. It is now. It used to be Dirk the Norseman.
Okay.
But I know all you locals call it Dirk the Norseman still. So when I messaged you about it, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be. We actually ended the night there. We went to a bunch of other places prior to that because with the long weekend, I said let me go up to Brooklyn and have some good beers and holler at the ladies. But that's another story.
Sorry I wasn't able to meet up. I just got back from Orlando, and I'm about to head back out to Austin. It's just like cramming all my life chores to a couple days for leaving.
So you got any are outside of I know you've been busy, but are you going to catch up on anything? Any fights that interest you? Any buzz news on Twitter? Like Michael Bisping announced his retirement last night, so I don't know how far behind you are.
Like I did read about that, and everything I've been reading about him, especially there's one particular Tommy Tohold tweet that just like summarized what a world-shaking badass he was, and made me want to just start from the beginning and figure out what he's all about. Are there any particular Bisping fights you guys would recommend?
Oh, there's a few, but they're not the ones that he would want me to recommend.
Well, I mean,
his fight with Luke Rockhold at UFC 199. That's when he wins the title. Both of his fights with Dan Henderson, although one doesn't end well for him. God, he fought a lot. Some of his earlier fights, I'd avoid the Matt Hamill fight. I wouldn't waste 20 minutes of my life watching that one again.
Thank you.
Kung Lee's a really good fight. I think that's UFC China or Shanghai or one of those fight nights on Fuel TV or something. I don't know how it's labeled on Fight Pass. But I would say I'd take Kung Lee. Those would be the ones. I think Vanderlei Silva beat him, but it was a good fight. But I would say the Kung Lee and the Luke Rockhold would probably be the two where he just looks great. I
just wrote down Rockhold. This is a strong figure.
Yeah, but I would also recommend watching the. I know Matt was saying the ones he wouldn't want you to recommend, but the cool thing about his career with the Rockhold and the Henderson fights is that the first time they fought, he lost those, but then he came back. He came back when they fought again, and it looked like obviously Rockhold took him light in that fight. If you'll notice it during the fight that Rockhold is kind of treating him like he's nothing, and he beats him. And the same thing with the fight with Henderson. Like Henderson lands that punch a couple of times, and he takes it better than he took it in the first fight. So that's just what's cool about Bisping's career. The fact that he was able to, he never cared about the wins or the losses. He was just always down to fight. So definitely, man, that's something to watch on your flights and stuff.
And his fight with Anderson Silva. That's another one that I'd recommend just for the back and forth, and you'll see what happens to Michael in that fight, and then how he kind of recovers from it. But yeah, man, the guy was a great fighter. I was always I'm sitting right here with a Dan Henderson. That's actually made from his first fight where he's about ready to drop the H-bomb on his buddy. They were coaches on The Ultimate Fighter, so they had a big grudge going into that fight and set it up. It was actually UFC 100. That's a great event if you haven't seen that one.
I haven't.
That's got Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, George St. Pierre, Jon Jones is on the undercard of that fight. He's actually a preliminary fighter against Stephan Bonner, another guy from The Ultimate Fighter 1. So that's a great event.
So
wow, yeah.
That's awesome.
So John, I know we talked about your stuff with the video game business and stuff, but I know you published a book too. Do you want to let folks know about that, or is that something you want to plug right now?
Sure. I'll touch lightly on it just because I never know where where it's gonna hit with people. So I published a book called How I Escaped Evangelical Hell, a memoir. So very long story short, I was raised by crazy evangelical Christians and homeschooled, abused, had a really difficult life. And the book was about how I had access to a computer and wanted to learn to be a video game developer, and how that got me out. I developed an amazing career, got out of a crappy situation, managed to escape and build a life. And the story is about how I won and how video games essentially saved my life. And it's a weird thing to talk about, and there's no like easy way into it. Just like, hey, here's some great fights and also child abuse.
Well, I mean, I wasn't trying to turn it negative. I just want to.
Oh no, I know. There's no good way into it. I've tried to find it. I've tried to I tried to do it. The best thing I can do is just try to laugh about it. But
I think it's a testament though to show like obviously you handled all that negativity, turned it into something positive, and then when this whole confusion with Johnny Bones Jones happened, you kind of used the same outlook and turned all that trolling into something positive. So I don't know. I think it's a good story for people to see and hear about.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, it sucks that you had to be raised like that, and it gives religious people a bad name because it just any aspect of life you've got assholes and people who take anything to the extreme. And but like I say, you've seen you on here and smiling and laughing about stuff. That's pretty cool.
Thanks,
to get
man.
through that and be able to write a book and talk about it and just express yourself.
Thank you.
As I've gotten older, I've definitely gained respect for being able just to talk about things and get stuff out in the open. Even if it pisses somebody off or hurts somebody's feelings, they didn't care about your feelings apparently. So get it out now and and hopefully make some money off of it.
Exactly. It's like your story is yours, and fucking cash in.
Hey, they named you Jon Jones. You could have been like Harvey Weinstein or something like
that. Oh my god! Like every single time I say someone else on Twitter that has like anything even remotely like political, like actually George Papadopoulos, he's like a financial planner from I think Michigan. He's this goofy Greek dad who got pulled into this whole like.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah,
this conspiracy thing. Or to hold the Trump thing, but he and I follow each other now and make jokes about the whole thing. He's just like, my God, just put him in jail already. I want to get back to my normal life. He has dad jokes his way through it like a champion. It's amazing to see.
Well, you too, man. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your stories with us. And we definitely got to get together again for some beers when you're free and not traveling.
I'd like that very much.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get out there in November, so maybe everything will work together and we can all get together, go to one of the big fights or something.
Hell yeah, man, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of big fights, June 7th, if you're not Pro Fight League is holding an event at the Hulu Theater, Madison Square Garden. I'm going to be covering it, so if you're maybe we can tag you on some tweets on Twitter and see if they can't give you the VIP treatment as well.
Actually, I am on a plane during that.
All right.
I'll see if anything streams.
Yeah, they're streaming it on Facebook. It'll be on NBC Sports too, so you could definitely catch it.
Excellent.
But all right, I mean, I don't have anything else unless you have anything else, Matt.
No, just want to thank you for coming on. Obviously, you're at Jon Jones on Twitter. And as normal fans can check us out at Carbazol, myself at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram, and the show at Combat Hour. So if any beer companies were listening and want to sponsor the show, we're always open to that. And basically, sounds like if there's a God, my somebody named Matt Hawkins will create the new superhero movie and I'll get free tickets to Comic-Con.
That's good. That's good.
Please change your name to Zack Snyder and you'll have an exciting year or two. But guys,
awesome.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you and everybody for humoring me. I really enjoyed this. It was a pleasure meeting you. Let's have beers when you're here in November.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a plan. 40th birthday definitely can do some damage.
All right.
Cool. Oh, we're gonna make you come to us.
Yeah.
Sounds like a plan, man. Nice to meet you, and thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks so much. Cheers, guys.
Thanks, John.